The pit is deeper than 50 men standing on each other's shoulders. The walls of the pit are hard yellow earth. Lantern light moves across the clay soldiers like water over stones. 8,000 figures stand in straight rows. They face the east. They have been facing the east for 2,000 years. They will face the east for 2,000 more. Also, the year is 209 before the Common Era. Qin Shi Huang is 49 years old. He has been the first emperor of China for 12 years. He united 7 warring kingdoms under one rule. He burned the books of his enemies. He standardized the writing system. He built the first walls that would become the Great Wall. He did all of this with iron will and the bodies of 1 million workers. Now he is dying. The emperor does not speak of death. No one speaks of death near the emperor, but everyone knows. The alchemists cannot find the elixir of immortality. The mercury they gave him burns his stomach. His skin has turned pale. His eyes have sunk into his skull. He coughs blood into silk handkerchiefs and tells his servants to burn them before anyone sees. The clay army is his solution to death, not the death of his body that cannot be stopped now, the death of his power, the death of his name, the death of everything he built in 12 years of war and blood. He will not go to the afterlife alone. He will not go to the afterlife unarmed. He will take an army with him. 8,000 soldiers stand in the pit. Each one is different. Each face is unique. No 2 soldiers have the same nose, or the same mouth, or the same eyes. The craftsmen used real soldiers as models. They measured faces. They studied expressions. They carved the clay while the soldiers stood still for hours in the heat. The archers kneel in the first row. Their hands are positioned to hold bows that no longer exist. The wood of the bows has turned to dust over the centuries, but the hands remember. The fingers curve around nothing. The arms are bent for drawing a string that has not been pulled in 2,000 years. The infantry stands behind the archers. Their armor is carved from clay. Each plate of armor is separate. Each plate was pressed into the wet clay by hand. The craftsmen worked for 38 years on this project. They started when the emperor was still a king of Qin. They continued when the other 6 kingdoms fell. They will continue after the emperor takes his last breath. The smell of the pit is earth and lamp oil and human sweat. The clay has its own smell, damp, heavy, like rain on dry ground. The workers move between the rows of soldiers. They carry baskets of wet clay. They carry carving tools made of bone and bronze. They carry lanterns that swing from wooden poles. The shadows of the workers move across the faces of the clay army. The shadows make the soldiers look alive for a moment. The emperor arrives in a carriage, pulled by 4 horses. He is too weak to walk. His servants help him down from the carriage. He leans on a wooden staff. His silk robes are black and red, the colors of Qin, the colors of conquest. He walks slowly between the rows of clay soldiers. His servants hold lanterns high so he can see the faces. He stops at an archer. The archer's face is young, 19 years old. The craftsman used a real soldier from the Qin army. That soldier is probably dead now, killed in the wars against Chu or Zhao or Han. But his face lives in the clay. His youth lives in the clay. His expression of waiting lives in the clay. The emperor touches the face of the clay soldier. His fingers are thin. The nails are yellow from the mercury. He whispers something to the soldier. The servants do not hear the words. No one ever knows what the emperor whispered to the clay army, but his eyes are wet when he pulls his hand away. The workers watch from the shadows. They have been watching the emperor for years. They have seen him angry. They have seen him cold. They have seen him order the death of scholars and the burning of books. They have never seen him cry. They look away from the emperor's tears. Looking at an emperor's tears is a death sentence. The master craftsman steps forward. His name is never recorded in history. The historians of the Han Dynasty erased his name. They erased the names of everyone who worked for Qin Shi Huang. But he is here in the lantern light, an old man with clay under his fingernails and fire in his eyes. He tells the emperor that the army is nearly complete. 8,000 soldiers stand in the pit. The officers are finished. The chariots are finished. The horses are finished. Only the emperor's own statue remains unfinished. The master craftsman asks if he should continue working on the emperor's statue. The emperor shakes his head. He says, "There is no time." He says the alchemists have told him he has weeks, not months. Weeks. The master craftsman bows his head. He has given 38 years of his life to this project. He will not see it finished. The emperor's clay body will never stand with the clay army. The emperor walks back to his carriage. He stops at the edge of the pit. He looks at the 8,000 faces turned toward the east. The east is the direction of the conquered kingdoms. The east is the direction of the sea where the immortals live. The east is the direction the emperor's soul will travel when his body dies. He tells his servants that no one will leave the pit when the work is done. The workers will stay with the army. The craftsmen will stay with their creations. The master craftsman will stay with his unfinished emperor. The clay soldiers need company in the darkness. The workers will provide that company. The servants do not question the order. No one questions the emperor's orders. The workers in the pit do not know they are already dead. They will learn the truth when the last lantern goes out. They will learn the truth when the last basket of clay is emptied. They will learn the truth when the earth closes over their heads. The carriage leaves. The lanterns swing. The shadows move across the faces of the clay soldiers. The workers return to their labor. They carve. They shape. They smooth the wet clay with wet fingers. They do not know they are making their own tomb. The pit covers an area larger than 50 houses placed side by side. The excavation took 10 years to complete. 40,000 workers removed the earth with bronze shovels and bamboo baskets. They carried the earth on their backs up wooden ramps. They dumped the earth outside the walls of the emperor's tomb complex. The earth formed hills that can still be seen today. The workers who dug the pit are not the same workers who built the clay soldiers. The diggers were peasants from the conquered kingdoms. They were taken from their farms and villages. They were given bronze tools and told to dig. They dug until their hands bled. They dug until their backs broke. Most of them died in the pit. Their bodies were buried where they fell. There was no time for proper funerals. The emperor was in a hurry. Death does not wait for diggers to rest. The craftsmen who made the clay soldiers came from different places. Some were potters from the kingdom of Han. Some were sculptors from the kingdom of Zhao. Some were painters from the kingdom of Chu. The emperor gathered the best artists from all 7 kingdoms. He gave them a single instruction: make an army that will last forever. The craftsmen worked in workshops above the pit. The workshops had wooden roofs to keep out the rain. The floors were packed earth. The kilns were made of brick. The heat from the kilns was intense. The craftsmen worked without shirts in the summer. Their skin was red from the heat. Their eyes were red from the smoke. The process of making a single clay soldier took 70 days. First, the feet were sculpted on a wooden base. The base kept the soldier standing while the rest of the body was built. Then the legs were added. Then the torso. Then the arms. Then the hands. The hands were the most difficult part. Each finger had to be shaped individually. Each fingernail had to be carved with a bronze tool. The head was made separately. The heads were stored on wooden shelves in the workshops. Hundreds of heads, thousands of heads. They looked like heads from a nightmare. Heads without bodies. Heads with open eyes and open mouths. Heads waiting to be attached to bodies. Waiting to be fired in kilns. Waiting to be cooled before painting. The painting of the clay soldiers took another 30 days. The craftsmen used natural pigments: black from burned bone, red from cinnabar, white from ground quartz, blue from azurite, green from malachite, purple from a synthetic pigment invented by the Qin alchemists. The purple pigment was so difficult to make that the recipe was lost after the emperor died. No one in the next 2,000 years could recreate Qin purple. The painted soldiers looked alive from a distance. The colors gave them skin tones and eye colors and lip colors. Some soldiers had mustaches painted in black. Some had beards painted in dark brown. Some had eyebrows painted at different angles to show different emotions. The craftsmen studied the faces of real soldiers for hours before painting. They wanted the clay soldiers to look like men who had seen battle. The weapons were real, not clay. Real bronze swords, real bronze spears, real bronze crossbow triggers. The swords were coated with chromium. The Qin metallurgists discovered chromium plating 2,000 years before it was patented in Germany. The chromium kept the swords from rusting. The swords are still sharp today. A man could pick up a Qin sword and cut his finger on the blade. The blade has been waiting 2,000 years to draw blood. The weapons were stored in wooden racks next to the soldiers. The wood has rotted over time. The weapons have fallen to the ground, but the soldiers still reach for them. Their clay hands are positioned to hold swords that now lie at their feet. Their clay arms are bent to carry shields that have turned to dust. The emperor visited the workshops once every month. He came with his servants and his guards. He walked between the rows of drying soldiers. He touched the faces of the soldiers who looked most like the men he had killed. He did not speak to the craftsmen. He did not thank them. He looked at their work and nodded. Then he left. The craftsmen did not expect thanks. They did not work for thanks. They worked because the emperor would kill them if they stopped. They worked because their families would be executed if they ran away. They worked because there was no other choice. The Qin legal system did not offer choices. It offered obedience or death. The master craftsman knew the truth about their future. He had heard the emperor's order. No one would leave the pit. The workers would be buried with the army. The craftsmen would be buried with their creations. The master craftsman did not tell his workers. He did not want them to stop working. The work was the only thing keeping them alive. Once the work stopped, the death would begin. He worked harder than anyone. He sculpted 40 soldiers by himself. He painted 60 soldiers by himself. He worked through the nights when the other craftsmen slept. He worked by lantern light. The oil in the lanterns came from human fat. The emperor's alchemists rendered the fat of executed prisoners. The master craftsman did not know where the oil came from, or maybe he knew and did not care. There was no room for caring in the pit. Qin Shi Huang was born in 259, before the Common Era. His name at birth was Zhao Zheng. He was born in the city of Handan, in the kingdom of Zhao. His father was a prince of Qin, who was held as a hostage in Zhao. His mother was a dancer from a wealthy family. The marriage was not a love match. It was a political arrangement between two kingdoms that would later destroy each other. The boy grew up in a foreign land. The children of Handan called him a barbarian from Qin. They threw stones at him in the streets. They called his mother a dancer and his father a prisoner. Zheng learned to hate the people of Zhao. He learned to hate the children who threw stones. He learned to hate the city that held his family hostage. That hatred would later drive him to destroy Zhao completely. He returned to Qin when he was 9 years old. His father had become the king of Qin. The hostage prince had escaped from Zhao and claimed his throne. Zheng was no longer a prisoner's son. He was a king's son. The boy who had been called a barbarian was now the first prince of the most powerful kingdom in China. His father died 3 years later. Zheng became the king of Qin at 13 years old. The ministers of the court expected to control the boy king. They expected to give orders while the child sat on the throne. They were wrong about the boy king. He listened to their advice. He nodded at their suggestions. Then he did what he wanted. He had been learning patience in the streets of Handan. He had learned to wait. He had learned to watch. He had learned to strike when no one expected it. The young king began conquering the other kingdoms when he was 22. Han fell first, then Zhao, then Wei, then Chu, then Yan, then Qi. One by one, the 6 kingdoms of eastern China fell to the armies of Qin. The wars lasted 10 years. 10 million people died. The rivers ran red with blood. The fields were covered with bones. The king declared himself the first emperor after the last kingdom fell. He took the title Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. He said his dynasty would last 10,000 generations. He said his name would be remembered forever. He said the 6 kingdoms would never rise again. His mother did not live to see his victory. She died when he was 20. He visited her on her deathbed. She asked for his forgiveness. She had done things she should not have done after his father died. Affairs with ministers. Plots against her own son. The young king looked at his dying mother and said nothing. He turned and walked out of the room. He did not attend her funeral. The emperor had 49 children with dozens of concubines. He did not know all of their names. The children were raised by servants in separate palaces. The emperor saw his sons once a year at the winter festival. He did not play with them. He did not hold them. He looked at them the way a farmer looks at horses. He was assessing their strength for the future. His oldest son was named Fusu. Fusu was gentle and kind. He read the Confucian texts that his father had burned. He spoke against the execution of scholars. He believed the empire should be ruled by wisdom, not fear. The emperor hated Fusu for these qualities. He sent his oldest son away from the capital. He sent him to the northern border to supervise the construction of the Great Wall. He did not expect Fusu to return. His youngest son was named Huhai. Huhai was cruel and weak. He agreed with everything his father said. He laughed when his father ordered executions. He asked to watch the burning of the books. The emperor loved Huhai for these qualities. He kept his youngest son close to the throne. He did not know that Huhai would destroy everything he built within 3 years of his death. The emperor's body was failing in his final years. The alchemists gave him mercury to drink. They said the mercury would make him immortal. The mercury burned his throat and his stomach. His teeth fell out. His hair turned white, but he kept drinking the mercury. He was afraid of death. He was more afraid of death than he was of the poison killing him slowly. He dreamed of clay soldiers in his final months. The soldiers came to him in the night. They stood around his bed. Their painted eyes watched him sleep. Their painted lips smiled at his fear. He woke up screaming sometimes. The servants ran to his room. They found the emperor sitting up in bed. His eyes were wide. His hands were shaking. He told the servants to bring more clay, more soldiers. Ha, ha, more archers, more officers. The army was not large enough. The army could never be large enough. The final month of construction was unlike any month before. The workers stopped sleeping. They worked in shifts around the clock. The kilns burned day and night. The smoke from the kilns rose into the winter sky. The smell of burning clay filled the air for miles. The people in nearby villages thought the emperor was making war again. They were not wrong. He was making war on death itself. The craftsmen had completed 7,000 soldiers. 1,000 soldiers remained unfinished. The emperor's death was coming faster than the craftsmen could work. The master craftsman made a decision without consulting anyone. He ordered the workers to stop making new soldiers. He ordered them to focus on painting the unfinished soldiers. An unpainted soldier was better than no soldier at all. The workers painted with desperate speed. Their brushes moved across the clay like birds in flight. They did not paint carefully. They did not paint beautifully. They painted quickly. Some soldiers received 2 coats of paint instead of 3. Some soldiers received no paint at all on their backs. Some soldiers were set in the pit without their arms attached. The arms lay at their feet. The hands reached for weapons that would never be held. The emperor made his final visit to the pit on a cold morning in winter. The wind came from the north. The wind carried dust from the Gobi Desert. The dust settled on the clay soldiers like gray snow. The emperor walked between the rows of soldiers for the last time. His servants supported him on both sides. He could not walk without help anymore. He stopped at the chariots. 4 chariots made of clay. Each chariot had 4 clay horses. Each chariot had a clay driver with his arms extended to hold reins that no longer existed. The emperor touched the face of the clay driver. The driver looked like a man the emperor had killed in the war against Chu, a young officer who had refused to surrender, a young officer who had fought to the death. The emperor said he remembered that man. He remembered his face. He remembered his name. The name was something ordinary, Li, or Wang, or Zheng, a common name for a common soldier. But the emperor remembered. He had watched the young officer die. He had watched the light leave the young man's eyes. He had ordered his soldiers to bury the body with respect. Then he had ordered his craftsmen to find the face. to carve the face, to place the face in the pit. The servants did not know what to say. The emperor was speaking more than he usually spoke. He was speaking like a man who knew he would not speak again. They helped him to the edge of the pit. They helped him to his carriage. They helped him back to his palace. The emperor died 3 weeks later. The date was September 10, 210 before the Common Era. He was 49 years old. He had ruled China for 36 years. He had been the first emperor for 12 years. He died in a traveling palace on a road leading east. He was searching for the immortals when death found him. His youngest son, Huhai, took the throne. The ministers did not announce the emperor's death. They kept the body in a carriage with rotten fish to hide the smell. They forged a letter from the dead emperor ordering Fusu to commit suicide. The gentle son drank the poison. The cruel son sat on the throne. Huhai did not care about the clay army. He did not care about his father's tomb. He did not care about the workers in the pit. He gave one order concerning the construction: complete it quickly. Bury it completely. Forget it completely. The workers received the order on a rainy day. The rain fell into the pit. The water pooled around the feet of the clay soldiers. The workers stood in the water and listened to the minister read the emperor's final command. They did not know the emperor was already dead. They thought the command came from the living emperor. They did not know they were following orders from a corpse. The command was simple: seal the pit, cover the soldiers, no one leaves. The workers began covering the clay army with earth. They used the same baskets they had used to remove the earth 10 years before. Now they filled the baskets with earth and dumped the earth on the soldiers. The clay faces disappeared under the falling soil. The painted eyes saw darkness for the first time. The painted mouths opened in silent screams. Some workers tried to run. The guards cut them down before they reached the ramps. Their bodies fell into the pit. The earth covered them with the soldiers. Their bones lie next to the clay bones of the army. No one can tell where the worker ends and the soldier begins. The master craftsman did not run. He stood at the center of the pit. He watched the earth fall on his life's work. He had given 38 years to this project. His hands had shaped 1,000 faces. His eyes had studied 10,000 expressions. He had poured his youth and his strength and his hope into clay. Now the clay was being buried. He sat down at the feet of the emperor's unfinished statue. The statue had no head. The head was on a wooden shelf in the workshop. No one would ever attach it now. The master craftsman closed his eyes. The earth fell on his shoulders. The earth fell on his hands. The earth fell on his open eyes. He did not scream. He did not cry. He whispered something to the headless emperor. The words were soft. The words were lost under the falling earth. The words were for a dead man who could not hear. The earth settled over the pit. The workers were gone. The craftsmen were gone. The master craftsman was gone. 8,000 clay soldiers stood in darkness. They had been standing in darkness for 2,000 years. They will stand in darkness for 2,000 more. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang was never finished. The walls were built. The underground palace was dug. The traps were set. The crossbows were loaded. But the emperor's body was never placed in the tomb. His youngest son, Huhai, buried his father in a different location. No one knows where. The first emperor's bones have never been found. He searched for immortality and found only disappearance. The clay army waited in silence. The wooden structures above them rotted and collapsed. The painted colors faded to gray. The chromium swords remained sharp. The crossbow triggers remained ready. The soldiers waited for a battle that would never come. The farmers of Lintong village did not know about the army beneath their fields. They planted wheat in the spring. They harvested wheat in the fall. The wheat grew in soil that covered 8,000 soldiers. The farmers walked over the clay faces every day. They never knew. The soldiers looked up at the roots of wheat and the feet of farmers and the wheels of carts. The soldiers saw nothing. The soldiers had been blind for centuries. In 1974, a farmer named Yang Jifa was digging a well. His shovel hit something hard. He dug around the hard object. He pulled a clay head from the earth. The head had open eyes and an open mouth. The head looked like a man who had been screaming for 2,000 years. Yang Jifa dropped the head. He ran to tell the local authorities. The authorities came with shovels and brushes and wonder. The excavation took 40 years. Archaeologists from around the world came to Lintong. They brushed the earth from the clay faces. They photographed the painted soldiers before the colors faded in the air. They counted the swords and the spears and the crossbow triggers. They found the bodies of workers mixed with the bodies of soldiers. They found the master craftsman's bones at the feet of the headless emperor. The head of the emperor's statue has never been found. The archaeologists searched the workshops. They searched the pits. They searched the surrounding fields. The head is gone. Maybe it was stolen. Maybe it was broken. Maybe it is waiting somewhere. A clay face with closed eyes. A clay face that has never seen the army it was meant to lead. The pit is open now. Tourists walk on wooden platforms above the clay soldiers. They take photographs with their phones. They point at the faces. They read the signs about the Qin dynasty and the first emperor. They do not stay long. There are other pits to see, other soldiers to photograph, other wonders to consume. Whoa. The soldiers stand in silence. Their painted eyes have faded to gray. Their painted lips have faded to nothing. Their hands still reach for weapons that lie at their feet. Their arms still bend to hold shields that have turned to dust. They wait for an emperor who never came. They wait for a battle that never started. They wait for a command that never arrived. The wind moves through the excavation pit. The wind comes from the east. The same east the soldiers have faced for 2,000 years. The wind carries dust from the Gobi Desert. The dust settles on the clay faces. The dust covers the fading paint. The dust makes the soldiers look older than they are. The farmers still plant wheat in the fields above the unexcavated pits. They still harvest wheat in the fall. The wheat grows in soil that covers thousands of soldiers still waiting to be found. The farmers do not think about the soldiers. The soldiers do not think about the farmers. The soldiers do not think at all. They are clay. They have always been clay. They will always be clay. But sometimes, on quiet nights, the people of Lintong hear something, a sound from beneath the earth, a sound like shifting clay, a sound like painted lips opening after 2,000 years, a sound like 8,000 soldiers whispering in the darkness. The sound is not real. The sound is the wind moving through underground cracks. The sound is the settling of ancient soil. The sound is nothing. But the people of Lintong do not walk alone at night. They do not listen too closely to the earth. They do not wonder what the clay soldiers are waiting for. They know what the soldiers are waiting for. The soldiers are waiting for an emperor who will never come. The soldiers are waiting for a battle that will never begin. The soldiers are waiting for a command that will never be spoken. The command was spoken 2,000 years ago. The command was spoken by a dying man who believed he would live forever. The command was spoken by a father who never held his children. The command was spoken by a conqueror who conquered nothing but clay. The command was simple: guard the tomb, protect the emperor, wait for his return. The soldiers are still waiting. The soldiers will always be waiting. Good night.